The speech began with familiar architecture, strength, victory, numbers that didn't require sourcing because the volume at which they were delivered was supposed to substitute for verification. The United States had brought in $18 trillion. The stock market had hit 53 all-time records. There was no inflation, none, not any. And the country, which had been dead and crippled under the previous administration, was now the hottest nation anywhere in the world. "Of course there's inflation, you idiot," the analyst watching on one channel said flatly, before moving to the next clip. Kimmel let the statement breathe, then looked at his audience. "No inflation," he said. "Record highs. Hottest country on earth." He paused. "Meanwhile, people can't afford gas or groceries, and they sure as hell can't afford rent." The audience laughed, but it was the laugh that carries weight. The one that arrives when absurdity is being used to hold a real cost. The receipts, as always, were available. Donald Trump gave what analysts called perhaps the worst presidential address to the nation in modern history, slurred, incoherent, and packed with contradictions that fact-checkers were still untangling at sunrise. Oil crossed $103 a barrel before the speech was over. The markets plunged, and while the most powerful man on earth was threatening to bomb Iran back to the Stone Age and telling allied nations to go protect the Strait of Hormuz themselves, Jimmy Kimmel was in a writer's room reading receipts. The Epstein files were coming. The receipts were already there, and the president's own party was beginning to break. The address came from the kind of setting designed to project authority. Flags flanked, podium positioned, cameras locked in tight. The visual grammar of presidential solemnity, arranged to communicate that what the country was about to hear carried the weight of careful thought and strategic purpose. It did not. What the country heard instead was a speech that editors at major outlets described in terms usually reserved for medical charts. Slurred delivery, low energy, incoherent sequencing, statements that contradicted each other within the same paragraph and occasionally within the same sentence. Oil surged past $103 a barrel before the address finished. Brent crude approached $106. The markets, which do not respond to performance, only to information, had already assessed what they heard and rendered their verdict in real time. Allies watched with something between confusion and concern. Analysts scrambled. Fact-checkers opened their documents. And across the country, at 11:35 at night, Jimmy Kimmel turned on the lights. Karoline Leavitt had been standing at the White House podium for months now. The youngest press secretary in American history, 27 years old, dispatched daily into a briefing room full of reporters carrying questions that no prepared talking point could fully absorb. She arrived each day the same way, composed, quick, confident, the body language of someone who has been trained to treat every question as an opportunity for redirection and every contradiction as something to reframe rather than acknowledge. She was good at the job. She had to be, because the job, in this particular administration, required defending statements that no economist would testify to under oath, explaining positions that reversed themselves between Monday and Friday, and managing the optics of a president who described her lips at campaign rallies with machine gun sound effects. Donald Trump arrived at the podium the way he always arrives, certain, expansive, already inhabiting the conclusion he intended to deliver before the argument for it had been constructed. He had cards, he said. All the cards. They had none. Jimmy Kimmel watched the clip in his writer's room. "What cards are you referring to, Donald?" he asked the screen. "They control the Strait of Hormuz. Isn't that the card? The Strait of Hormuz card?" Then came the sequence that made fact-checkers stop and read it twice. Trump said Iran had been decimated, obliterated, knocked back. They had nothing left, no weapons, no leverage, no capacity. Then, in the same speech, he said Iran was launching terror attacks against commercial oil tankers, controlling the Strait of Hormuz, causing the spike in gasoline prices that Americans were feeling at the pump. The contradiction sat in the transcript like a question nobody had been asked to answer. "So wait," the analyst said, leaning forward. "You obliterated them, but they're controlling the strait. They have Shahed drones and ballistic missiles. They're blowing up fuel ships." A pause. "You're blaming them, Donald, but you obliterated them. What are you talking about?" Kimmel did not need additional commentary. He played the clips in sequence. The decimation claim, the tanker attack claim, the gasoline price blame. Each one sourced, each one time-stamped, each one from the same address, placed in a row for the audience to do the arithmetic. Then came the war crimes moment. Trump told the nation that if no deal was reached, the United States would hit each and every one of Iran's electric generating plants, very hard, and probably simultaneously. Thanks for the clarification on simultaneously, the analyst said, and you just admitted to committing war crimes because that's an attack on civilian infrastructure. Kimmel let the clip play, let the words settle, then noted, with the particular calm of a man who has been doing this long enough to know that the most devastating response to an absurd statement is sometimes not a joke but an agreement, that at least the president had clarified the timeline. But it was the Epstein dimension that made the week something more than a standard cycle of contradictions. Trump had signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. He had thrown himself a ceremony. He had taken credit in a post longer than most executive summaries. The Justice Department had 30 days to release the documents, eventually publishing over 3.5 million pages in compliance with the act. And somewhere in that archive was the answer to a question that 3/4 of Americans, across party lines, had been demanding for years. The White House's position shifted visibly within the same week. After months of stalling, hedging, and browbeating members of his own party who pushed for full transparency, Trump reversed course completely. He posted that House Republicans should vote to release the files because, in his words, "we have nothing to hide." Kimmel read the post aloud. "We have nothing to hide," he said. Then he looked at the camera. "There's no we. It's just you, bro." The audience erupted, but the structural observation that followed was sharper than the joke, because Trump had only reversed course after it became clear the Senate had no intention of stopping the vote. John Thune had reportedly told Mike Johnson the Senate would offer amendments. The Senate then passed the bill unanimously, every Republican included, without offering a single amendment. Either Johnson had been told something that was never true, or someone had changed their mind without telling him. Either way, the vote was unanimous. And Trump had discovered, in the bluntest available way, that his own party was done waiting. Marjorie Taylor Greene, ultra-MAGA herself, who had joined a bipartisan demand for full transparency and criticized Trump's refusal to push for it, had her endorsement withdrawn. Trump called her a ranting lunatic. Greene responded that he was trying to make an example of her to deter the release of the files. Again, the analyst watching noted, this is not the behavior of someone who has nothing to hide. Then came Karoline Leavitt's moment. March 11, 2025. White House briefing room. Leavitt at the podium. AP reporter Josh Boak, one of the few AP reporters still being granted questions since the Trump White House had blocked AP access over the agency's refusal to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, asked a direct question. Why, Boak asked, was Trump prioritizing tax hikes in the form of tariffs when he had promised tax cuts during the campaign? Leavitt interrupted him. Not true, she said. He's actually not implementing tax hikes. Then she delivered the line that made economists across the ideological spectrum stop reading and start fact-checking. Tariffs are a tax cut for the American people. Josh Boak, a veteran economics reporter, responded with 10 words that became some of the most memorable in White House briefing history. "I'm sorry, have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have." He explained calmly and precisely that tariffs are not charged on foreign companies. They are charged on American importers. This is not a partisan position. It is a basic economic fact taught in introductory courses at every university in the country. Leavitt did not answer the economics question. She said it was insulting that a reporter was trying to test her knowledge of economics. She said she regretted giving the Associated Press a question, and she moved on. PolitiFact rated her statement false. 7 economists across the ideological spectrum, libertarian, progressive, and everything between, were asked if any interpretation of her statement could be economically sound. The answer, according to independent libertarian economist Daniel Mitchell, was that the statement was nonsensical. Washington University economist Steve Fazzari said he could not think of any direct way in which a higher tariff constitutes a tax cut. MSNBC's Nicole Wallace said Leavitt was either tragically uninformed or lying. Kimmel watched the clip in his writer's room. He played it for the audience. He let it breathe. He noted that the clip had already hit 808,000 likes on a single Fox TikTok alone, which tells you something about who was watching and what they were thinking. Then he noted the structural absurdity without editorializing it into something smaller than it was. The White House had sent its 27-year-old press secretary to the podium to defend an economics position that no economist would testify to under oath. When she was caught, she declared herself insulted and ended the exchange. The next day, the White House was asked to explain the assertion. Their response did not directly answer the question. Then came the elections comment. In a Reuters interview, Trump said, "We've done so much. When you think of it, we shouldn't even have an election. We shouldn't even have an election." Kimmel opened his monologue and said the comment was disturbing, even for Trump. Leavitt was dispatched to the podium. She said he was joking, speaking facetiously. in a closed-door interview, just saying they were doing such a great job that maybe they should keep rolling. He didn't really mean it. Kimmel let her finish. Then he said he'd let his lady chipmunk, Karoline Leavitt, try to reel that one back in. The nickname landed. But more important than the joke was the logic underneath it, because Trump had said the same thing at a campaign rally in 2024, in front of tens of thousands of people on camera before he won. If I win, you'll never have to vote in another election again. That is not a joke. That is a public statement made at a public event before a national audience. And Leavitt was sent to the briefing room to call it facetious. Reporter Andrew Feinberg asked the question directly. Are you saying the president finds the idea of canceling elections funny? There was no good answer, because there is no good answer. Because a president who casually suggests not holding elections, whether joking or not, has already done the damage by suggesting it. The suggestion itself is the event. Calling it a joke afterward does not erase the sentence that produced it. Kimmel was doing what comedians do best in authoritarian moments. He was forcing the logic to its conclusion out loud in front of an audience, where the absurdity becomes undeniable. And Donald Trump, who can handle being called names, who has survived every insult his opponents have managed to construct, cannot handle a calm voice asking a specific question and then sitting in the silence while the answer fails to arrive. 3/4 of Americans want the Epstein files fully released. His own party voted unanimously to force the release. His most loyal congressional ally lost her endorsement for agreeing with the public. And the Attorney General stood at her own podium and answered a direct question about whether all documents would be released in 30 days by saying 3 times, "We will follow the law." Not yes, not the documents will be released. Just, we will follow the law. Kimmel did not need to add anything. He just played it. The address to the nation ended. The oil price stayed above $103. The markets did not recover by morning. The Epstein files kept arriving in heavily redacted batches, while congressional leaders threatened contempt proceedings against the Attorney General, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, stripped of her endorsement, told anyone who would listen that the president was trying to make an example of her. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Jimmy Kimmel made bagels for his children and showed up the next night and turned on the lights and kept asking the questions the podium was designed to prevent from being asked. The record is the record. The timestamps do not move. The clips do not change their length between the moment they are recorded and the moment they are played back. And a comedian with a desk and an archive had just walked a national audience through a presidential address, a tariff lie, a war crimes admission, an elections comment, an Epstein reversal, and a machine gun lips rally. All sourced, all time-stamped, all delivered with the calm of a man who has already decided that showing up is worth more than any threat made at 12:49 in the morning. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because the archive is always open, the receipts never expire, and the tape is always rolling.